Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A.IdlePodcast, the podcast where I do weekly book reviews. This week, I read Unbothered, The Power of Choosing Joy by Omarion. Recently, he has garnered quite a bit of attention on the internet for staying above petty drama and distancing himself from personal beef. So thus, the internet dubbed him the Unbothered King. This book was released in 2022 and it breaks down his even-keeled attitude while humanizing a star that sells millions of records. Background, first of all, no one could convince me that I wasn't going to marry this man back in '04 to '07-ish. I was a big B2K fan, which was the group where he kind of made his mark. And then he went solo. And from there, I was Omarion all day. That was my first crush. So I know all the background. But yes, he did start in B2K and he talks a lot about his career arc. So I don't want to go into too much detail just right now because we're going to get into it in a moment. But he is in the music industry. And recently, you probably have heard of B2K in association with the Millennium Tour. Now this book is broken down into 3 parts, starting with spiritual, which is really a few chapters discussing your life's direction. The next is physical, which is about personal relationships and maintaining them and how to navigate tough relationships. And then the last part is mental, which is really where most of the chapters are. And seemingly, we're discussing being unbothered. So this is kind of where we're talking about mindset and how to get there, how to get yourself there mentally to be in that position to be unbothered. I need to think of a different word than that because I don't want to keep using that word, but so the trajectory of this book, so we start out with purpose, which is the first chapter, which makes a lot of sense. Where are we going in the story, but also where are you going in life? And it ends with happiness, which should be the goal for everyone. In between, he discusses fear, masculinity, emotions, energy, and sex, which when we're talking about fear and emotions, and sometimes energy as well, that's kind of a running theme with a lot of books like this. So when it comes to spiritual books, if we're talking the 4 Agreements or the Mastery of Love, and then we're talking self-help books, which I don't like that category. I don't like the wording of that, but this book does fall under that category. So if we're talking that, or if we're talking even the 48 Laws of Power and how to master your emotions and look inside yourself, that's something that obviously, if it's being discussed in multiple books, it's something you need to really keep on your list in terms of personal improvement and how to manage fear or control fear or have even a healthy relationship with fear. But your emotions, I think, are the greatest thing. Your reactions to things and making sure that they're not too overt, but also not going into your shell and avoiding everything at all costs. As far as Omarion's trajectory, we do get to discuss his career arc, but also his personal arc. Now, the difference between him and people that have regular jobs is that most of the time, your career and your personal arc are running in tandem. So as you get through college, you can get your first job and then you climb up the corporate ladder or you move to a different position or whatever may have you. That's going right along with you dating and finding someone you love and then marrying that person and having children. But since Omarion entered the music industry at such a young age, when he was a teenager, his career came first. And that's impactful because you're dealing with professional ups and downs that are, I guess, kind of more unstable than us because it's a different ball game when you're an artist in that industry and you're young. And so that kind of produces a little bit of trauma, especially for a teenager. And I think that his career impacted his personal life a little bit. And I don't want to say to his detriment because he discusses in the book how much he learned from that period of time. But nevertheless, his career, that whole discussion on his career starts first. And he takes us from when he was unsigned with the group to eventually evolving into B2K and selling all those records to going solo. And within that solo journey, he kind of moved through various different labels. At times, he was associated with TUG, Young Money, and MMG. So there's so much going on professionally that it kind of, I guess you could say it really did direct or redirect his personal life. And that includes from him growing up from being a teenager to being a man, to being the provider of the household, to then having children and navigating a relationship with his kids and things like that. So what I found though is that his personal arc is kind of where he's anchored now. That's where he's centered now. A lot of that being due to introspection and just understanding yourself. And that seems like a surface comment, but I would argue that your personal arc is more important than your professional one, no matter what career you're in, because you have to know yourself personally in order to get that success that you're striving for, whatever that may be. So it was just interesting to me to frame things in the way that it's almost like his personal growth was stunted a little bit because he started so early on in his career, which can probably be said though, now that I think about it, if you were to start any career that early, that probably will kind of hurt you a little bit. But it just doesn't necessarily happen to a lot of us that have 9-to-5s. You don't start those jobs until you're out of high school or out of college. So now there is a foreword, and that is written by Michael Beckwith. I hope I said that right. Who is the founder and CEO of Agape International Spiritual Center. And this, obviously, there's relevancy in him writing that forward because this book is very spiritually based, and he is a spiritual leader and someone that Omarion has had conversations with, and they have that connection, and he's able to understand where he's going spiritually. And so it's very appropriate that he would write the foreword for this book, and it also sets the tone because when I first picked this book up, I was not expecting for it to go in that direction. I wasn't expecting like a tell-all or anything, but to hear that a lot of him being unbothered, Omarion, has to do with him spiritually and how he was raised, his foundation in spirituality, and where he's at now. So that was pretty interesting to see. Now, there are a few subsections within the chapters that I think are super cool. So one being the affirmation breaks. So an affirmation is something that you'll say to yourself, for various reasons. It could be to anchor yourself. It could be to encourage yourself. An example, one of the affirmations of fear, or for fear, I should say, is as follows. This feeling will pass. This feeling will pass. I am capable of moving through this. My fear can teach me something. I am being of love and strength. So that's an example of one of the many affirmations that are in this book. And when you really, read this to yourself and say these things to yourself, it does become sort of an encouraging thing in that moment. There are various different topics of the affirmations. That includes fear, of course, success, certainty, growth, gratitude, strength, sex, energy, and life force, peace, and love. So there's a little bit of everything there. And after the affirmations, there is a section that is titled What It Means to Me. So this is Omarion's interpretation of those affirmations. And you might ask yourself, why do we need this? Well, first of all, you're reading the book because Omarion is unbothered and you want to know how he got that way. So this is his thought process laid out for you and how he interprets those affirmations. But he also gives the readers a chance to reflect in the reader reflections, which includes call to actions by like questions. So he'll write out a question. It's meant for you to answer verbally or write it in your journal. And it's thought provoking and it encourages further introspection, kind of under that topic, whatever the affirmation was talking about. There are also prayer breaks. So those are to be read out loud. Sometimes they include breathing exercises. I found that those were very centering and very calming. I read part of this book when I was in Starbucks and there was a lot going on. And when I got to one of the prayers, and even just saying it in my head, it really did kind of bring my energy down to a better level where I was able to think more and process better. And then lastly, we have energy checks. So again, this is just something meant to align the reader with themselves. And so it includes more thought-provoking questions. And all of these subsections are kind of sprinkled throughout the books. There's no like rhyme or reason. They're just there when it's necessary. Now, before we talk themes, I wanted to define unbothered. And this is something that spoke to me. He talks early on that unbothered is basically living in a high state of mind and consciousness, and it is not indifference, avoidance, or ignorance. So probably a few years ago now, I felt that if, like, in my personal journey, if something was causing me anxiety or I didn't want to be involved in something, I would just remove myself from it. And that's somewhat avoidance. You know, there are times when you have to kind of remove yourself out of it, but a great example of why that's not the answer is when Omarion decided to go back and do the reunion tour, and how, you know, first of all, that's part of his purpose with music and performing and being an artist and a musician, but also that you can still have your peace and you can still be unbothered while being in a situation that may not be something that's super comfortable for you. So I really did. I like that he kind of broke that down, because sometimes we think that being unbothered means completely just not caring, and that's not really what it is. It's not you being indifferent. It's not you being ignorant. You know, what you don't know won't hurt you. It's a state of mind. So anything that comes at you won't really affect you badly because you are centered within yourself. Okay, so first theme is obviously purpose. One of the first few questions he asks is what's your reason for being here? And so this is again another call to action for the audience to kind of explore that. And you can also interpret this as what can you do every day that makes you happy? You know, what is something that you're good at? What is something that calls to you? And that's how you find your purpose. A quote directly from the book is, "What am I here for?" That's a question that I ask myself when greeted with change or a moment of choice. So in times where you're not necessarily sure, you can always kind of jump back to being like, okay, what's my purpose? Does this speak to my purpose? Does it not? And we'll move forward there. Because there are times when you may be confused or you don't want to make a decision, but not making a decision is not unbothered. That's you kind of avoiding the situation. Another question he asked that pertains to purpose is, okay, so you know your purpose. How do you attain that purpose? Well, you get that through intention. He also said in the book, it was through discomfort that I started looking at my destiny in a new way. So that's another reinforcement that sometimes you're going to have to go through uncomfortable things on your journey, you know, to get or to accomplish what you're here to do. So it's not always going to be easy, but, you know, life is not easy. That's not how life goes. It will be really naive of you to think that once you found your purpose, you should just attain it that easily. That's not how it works. The second theme is passion. So obviously with Omarion, that's music, and surprisingly, that's family. And not surprisingly because I would ever doubt that about his character. I just didn't know how much he held his family to his core, and how that really was his foundation when he was introduced into the music industry, and how the motivation to care for them kind of transformed, you know, throughout the years. And as he got older and he started exploring that idea of fulfilling this role of being the man of the house, the provider of the house. He also discusses, you know, the balance. How do you coexist within these two worlds at the same time when it comes to family and music? And that was a good portion of the book, and how one can soothe the pain of the other one, or, you know, whatever, vice versa. So The third theme is growth, and that's honestly just Omarion's arc, just hearing him speak about his journey and how and why he does things. That's the whole book. And lastly, grounding. So grounding is something that it basically just means, to me, I interpret it as you're reconnecting with reality. There are times when someone can get so anxious that they're so wrapped up in what, they could be talking to you, but there's so much stuff going on in their head that it's like, take a breath, look around you, the world is not as crazy as your mind is kind of making you think. So a lot of the exercises and the prayer breaks and the affirmations really does serve as a grounding technique. And we all need that. For different people, it's different things. I have heard of people saying sometimes they go outside to ground themselves. Sometimes what I found with me, if I ever get to that point, all it takes for me to ground myself really is to just like go out in public and see other people and see that the world is moving without me, and that whatever decision that I was super anxious about, it's not really that deep. Whether it goes right or wrong, whether it goes my way or it doesn't, the world's going on, people are still living their lives. So I think that was an important aspect of the book, that it wasn't necessarily spelled out that this is grounding, but I think encouraging readers to find whatever they need to do to ground themselves is it can be very impactful. And I think that a lot of people in the world need this. Riding around all wound up all the time is not really beneficial. And it's going to get on the people around you. It's going to get on their nerves. So finding a way to bring yourself down, whether it's breathing or music or prayer, if you need to pick up the Bible, do what you got to do to bring yourself out of your head and experience life in front of you. Okay, so this was kind of a short book, so short review. Do I need to restate that I am an Omarion fan forever and always? Like, I'll always ride for Omarion. So I enjoyed this book. I felt that it did show more of his human side. And, I find that sometimes celebrity memoirs still seem like they still write kind of like they're out of touch, which is not a problem because, they're not living the same lives as us. But this one really did show me a different side to him. And I think that part of the reason this book works so well is because he doesn't put all of his business out there all of the time. So in a world where everyone is super accessible through social media and accessible instantaneously, I think that this book really does show us a lot of his personal side. I will say also that it's super quotable. There's a lot of different gems and one-liners in here. Super relevant for the time period we're in, where, people have short attention spans. And so also the chapters were not that long. So if you do want to just read a chapter and go a few days, read a chapter, whatever, it's not a super long book. And there are definitely a lot of quotes. If I could pick at anything though, I would restructure this book. I would have liked to read it like chronologically. So I would have done it in terms of, what he accomplished in his career, next phase of life, him growing as a person, growing as a man, having kids. I really loved the letter to his kids that was in here. That was super cute and super touching. That was one of the aspects that's like, it goes to show you this person is more than what you may see on TV. So yeah, I would have restructured it by like events in his lifetime and go that way, and then within that have the affirmations and have the discussion on masculinity and fear and all that stuff. So pretty good book. Quick read if you want to just do it in a day, not too bad. I only have one takeaway that personally speaks to me, so I think it'll probably speak to a lot of people. So Omarion said, being stagnant isn't an option for me because fear breeds laziness if you allow it. And I cannot agree more. And that's something that I've seen personally in myself. And that's one of the things that I fight. It's the idea that, I'm just gonna chill here. I can't do that because then I start to get fearful of what is on the other side or what's out there. And then I get lazy and then I don't accomplish anything. So I love that quote. Again, very quotable. So yeah, that's it. I really enjoyed this book. I think you should go out and get it, especially if you're on a personal journey or if you're just an Omarion fan like me. So thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. I will see you all next week.